Welcome to Working for Women, the Independent Women's Forum podcast, where we are changing the conversation about women and public policy for the better.
Hi, I'm Patrice Nwuka, Senior Policy Analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, and I'm your host for today's Working for Women podcast. I'm joined by Congressman Tim Walberg, who represents the 7th District of Michigan. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for the interest.
Terrific. Well, today we're here to discuss how pregnant women are treated in the workplace and how current laws can be improved. Now, we know this is an issue of the highest importance as we comprise a greater and greater share of the workforce, and we're increasingly likely to work during pregnancy as well as later into our pregnancies. So, Congressman, I'd love for you to help us understand this issue. Can you tell us what the law says right now about discrimination against pregnant women and why this current law is in need of reform?
Well, I think I can cut right to the chase. Appreciate that. As I looked at the law, initially I wondered why we even needed to change it until I saw the Young versus UPS decision that went down. The law basically, as it sits right now, says that a pregnant woman should be treated as any other woman in the workplace, and that pregnancy should not be any reason to discharge her from her duties or from the workplace. For me, as I read that basically says, hey, pregnancy isn't a disability for keeping a job. But in the Young versus UPS decision, the courts ultimately looked at it a different way and fashioned really a new test for determining when an employer's refusal to provide accommodations for a pregnant worker constituted a violation. And ultimately, the young lady who had been pregnant and working for UPS and had been basically discharged from her job until after her pregnancy and disallowed from even coming to work, it allowed that to stand. So hopefully my bill will change that.
That's great. So can you talk about the amendment that you've introduced with Representative Noem, to help make improvements to really clarify this federal law that would provide for protections against discrimination for pregnant women?
Well, what it does, it really gives the test that we would give for any person, for instance, who had a disability and yet was employed at a workplace, and the employer said, this person is valuable to us, we've hired them, and we understand they have a physical disability, and so we're going to make accommodations as necessary for them to be able to continue in the workplace. And so my bill will basically say the same thing, that for the time that this individual is pregnant and, for instance, is under a doctor's orders to not lift anything heavier than, say, 25 pounds in the workplace, or shouldn't be standing for long periods of time, for the period of time that that's in place until she gives birth and is able to resume full effort, that's an accommodation employers will give to the worker. So it just simply says treat a woman who is pregnant as any other woman in the workplace, giving the appropriate accommodations for that period of time that she's pregnant and needs those accommodations. And then subsequent to that, back to the same old job, same old workforce, the same old process, and we go on with life happily.
I think that sounds like a really good way to just clarify existing law rather than introducing new legislation. And it seems very common sense. So now thinking about other bills that are out there, I think there's another bill, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, and other efforts in Congress to try to address the same issue. Can you tell us why you think that your bill is a better approach?
I think mine is better because it builds on what is already commonly understood in the law and is in the law. We don't change the law. We just amend it enough to clarify it that this is what we really meant in the first place, and this is how it should be carried out. Whereas the other bill, I believe it's called the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act by Representative Nadler from New York, is a whole new law. It creates a standalone statute with significant litigation penalties. It really kind of puts the chip on the shoulder and says, "Knock it off," as opposed to just simply saying, The present law is fine. The principle, the spirit of the law is fine. We just wanted to tighten up a loophole to make it very clear to courts and otherwise. So we're not asking for anything other than just a simple accommodation for a relatively short-term period of time, 9 months at the worst, for a lady who has served well and is pregnant and should be considered not disabled, but her ability is altered for a period of time that will eventually allow her to give birth, successfully move on, and then come back to the workplace and continue fully functioning as she was before the pregnancy. So I really think we don't need to put more laws in place and make more confusion. Rather, take the present law, which is very simple, and I think will work very well with the minor changes that we put in my bill.
That's terrific. I think most Americans will appreciate the idea that instead of imposing new laws that could create new confusion, that you're actually just trying to clarify existing law that already does provide protections. Thank you so much, Congressman, for your time. I said we would keep it short and sweet, but this is definitely a lot of information for our listeners, and we really appreciate you spending a couple of minutes with us to talk through this.
I was just going to thank you as well, and thanks for your support for my legislation.
Terrific. Well, reforming the Pregnancy Discrimination Act has really been a policy priority for the Independent Women's Forum for years. We've actually listed it among one of the many changes to improve the lives of working women in our Working for Women report. I really encourage all of our listeners who are curious to learn more about this effort as well as other solutions to check out our report at workingforwomenreport.com. And, of course, visit our flagship website at iwf.org. Tune in next time for our next Working for Women podcast. Thank you, everyone.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, or stop by iwf.org for similar content.